Welcome back to Alia Mashtas and Martin Despang's show, Urban Transcendence. Today we're broadcasting from another place. The last couple of shows were from Dresden, Germany. We're still in Germany, but Dresden is in the east, and now we moved on more to the north, to the northern part of Germany. Getting here, I came from Hanover, Germany, which is my original home, and I had a beautiful 2-hour drive in my little Renault Twingo, 1996, because one of the main aspects of sustainability is keeping things in the life cycle. So I drove here, I had my roof open, and I drove through beautiful agricultural, rural, northern German landscape. I drove by its strawberry season and asparagus. This is something that is unknown pretty much in Hawaii. The white asparagus is beautiful and delicious. It's season now, so it's fresh, sort of off the farm to the table. Beautiful. And so I drove here for a very special reason, because some of the viewers encouraged me to also show some of my work. So I thought, why not begin with my most favorite project, with my most favorite client. So today I'm happy to have Konrad Krogmann as our guest. Thanks for having us. Thanks for being on the show. And again, I'm translating for Konrad. Also ich habe kurz gesagt, hast du damit richtig vorgestellt und mich bedankt. Ja, und ja, vielleicht erzählst du einfach ein bisschen über sozusagen deine Heimat, dein Umfeld, wie du aufgewachsen bist, was dich fasziniert an deiner Heimat.
Ja, die Region hier, das Südoldenburger Münsterland, ist eine Region, die von früher her eigentlich sehr arm war, eine sehr bäuerliche Struktur hatte, und durch diese bäuerliche Struktur haben sich sehr viele Kleinindustrien entwickelt, und das Handwerk ist sehr stark geworden. Das war überwiegend in den 60er Jahren. Zu dem Zeitpunkt hat mein Vater dann hier einen Zimmereibetrieb gegründet, auch überwiegend erst für im landwirtschaftlichen Bereich gearbeitet, Ställe gebaut, und hat dann aber auch sehr schnell gemerkt, dass man überregional auch schöne Gebäude errichten kann. Hat sich dann mehr oder weniger aus dem landwirtschaftlichen Bereich verabschiedet und ist dann in den Bereich öffentlicher Bau gegangen, sehr viele Schulen und sowas gebaut, und sind deswegen auch überregional tätig. Ja, den Betrieb Krogmann Holzbau gibt es jetzt seit über 50 Jahren. Ich bin vor knapp 15 Jahren eingestiegen. Leite den Betrieb jetzt mit 30 Mitarbeitern. Wir sind überwiegend tätig im Ingenieurholzbau, machen sehr viele Fassaden, Holzrahmenbau, Sanierung, sind also sehr vielfältig tätig.
So Konrad explains that he's homegrown here. This is his home, and it's a very rural agricultural area that traditionally was more on the poor side rather than being the rich people from the city. And so that led to that people had to be very creative, kind of very inventive. If you guys excuse the background noise, again, we're broadcasting live. We're here in front of a piece that we're going to talk about a little bit later. So this kind of societal setting encouraged the people to be proactive. And one of them was his dad, who was the founder of the firm, Holzbauer Krogmann, and he started off doing a lot of work for the agricultural industries around the region, and slowly but surely, probably sort of stimulated by the growth of economy in the 1960s, business was picking up, and he was kind of reaching out into a broader radius, but still pretty much staying local, but working for the more public areas, for clients, communities and cities. doing more public work. So, also du bist hier aufgewachsen, ist ja sehr ländlich, auch sehr bewaldet, das Gebiet. Erzähl vielleicht ein bisschen, wo auch sozusagen dann der Bezug zum Holz herkommt.
Der Bezug zum Holz ist eigentlich familiär. Mein Opa war schon Zimmermann. Mein Vater hat dann diesen Betrieb hier gegründet. Ich bin eigentlich aufgewachsen in diesem Zimmereibetrieb von klein her. Ich bin also auch schon mit 5 Jahren dann in der Werkstatt gewesen und durfte dann irgendwo kleine Nägelchen reinhämmern. Und der Werkstoff Holz hat mich eigentlich immer fasziniert und ja, für mich stand eigentlich immer fest, dass ich auch in diesem Betrieb eigentlich tätig werden wollte. Und es macht heute eigentlich noch viel mehr Spaß, als ich mir das eigentlich vorgestellt habe.
It's very interesting, of course, when selecting the talk sessions, I'm kind of keen on trying to find analogies, certain things that apply to Hawaii as well as to northern Germany. So this kind of working local and the kind of craftsmanship, Hawaii had some pretty important wood history. There was sandalwood. We talked before the show that there used to be sandalwood and then koa wood, which is not so much around anymore, and there's some ideas we have and we brainstormed about kind of reinstituting that potentially. So this is a good case study where Konrad said that his grandfather was already working with wood in the region than his father was, and now he is. In effect, I'm adding this, that your children as well are around and are also sort of passing on the family tradition. So he said as a very young child he saw grandpa working on wood, and so he started very early grabbing a couple of nails and hammers and probably hit your thumb a couple of times, but that didn't scare you away. It was more the opposite, that you said the more and more you're in the business, the more and more you enjoy and you appreciate. So the older you get, the more you really see the value in what you're doing for yourself, for your ohana, that's how Hawaii calls family, we talked about that before, and for your larger and broader community. Also diese Qualität dessen. Can you explain, wenn du ein bisschen erklärst, vielleicht so auch über das Gebäude reden, was hier vorher stand, sozusagen das Firmengebäude deines Vaters, sozusagen, welcher Geist? Ich wollte so ein bisschen darauf hinaus, dass ja früher hier eigentlich das Fachwerk so die ortstypische Bauweise war und die dann ja abgelöst wurde in den 60er Jahren vom Klinkerbau, und ja, das kann man auch sagen, Gebäude.
Gut, vorher standen hier 2 Wohnhäuser. Ja, wie soll ich das erklären?
Es wurde eigentlich von zu Hause gearbeitet, sozusagen, eigentlich so aus dem Wohnhaus heraus, ne?
Richtig, also es war schon vorher 2 Wohnhäuser, wo wir auch direkt drin gewohnt haben, wo die Familie drin gewohnt hat. In diesem Wohnhaus war gleichzeitig das Büro integriert für die Firma. Und es war immer ein Teil der Familie, war immer auch Büro und Arbeit, das gehörte eigentlich immer dazu. Nur nutzte die Büroarbeit immer mehr und nahm einen Platz ein, sodass wir uns irgendwann entscheiden mussten, wir brauchen ein Büro dazu. Und das war also mit der Firma eigentlich nicht mehr zu vereinbaren. Das ging gar nicht. Und da wir zwischenzeitlich in den 80er Jahren auch schon umgezogen waren, wir wohnen mittlerweile hinter dem Betrieb, stand jetzt an, entweder das alte Gebäude, was halt ein Wohnhaus war, zu sanieren, um dann ein Bürogebäude rauszumachen, oder eben neu zu bauen. Und da das eben halt immer auch nach einer Sanierung noch immer ein Wohnhaus ist und kein Bürogebäude, haben wir uns dazu entschlossen, das dann abzureißen und ein neues Bürogebäude zu erstellen.
So Konrad explains that the physicality of the buildings they work in comes from the Ohana background. So they originally were working out of 2 residences, basically. They were pretty vernacular, traditional homes. I'm trying to describe a little bit, pitched roofs and basically The tradition in this region here originally comes from half timbered, so it's wood. It's a fairly well wooded area, but wood was still used very efficiently and effectively. So rather than in southern Germany where it's the logs, so use a lot of wood and it doesn't really matter. Here somehow people were using wood in a more sparse, in a more selective way. So every 3 feet approximately you have a stud, and then you have an infill with brick or loam back in the days. So in the 1950s and 60s, his dad built these two dwellings, basically residential homes, and they were working out of these homes. In the 1980s, very early, business was getting too much, and what's principally great to have the live-work combination, which is another subject I think is more and more interesting to look into again, to kind of rediscover for Hawaii as well, made Konrad move out of the too tiny space and build his own home in the back of the property. And then more recently, when the company was expanding more and more, the decision was to once again remodel and upgrade or update the existing, or to build a new building. And he says that even though you update and upgrade, it will always be a dwelling and not an office building. Also dann im Grunde genommen so vielleicht die Arbeitsweise und auch im Wesentlichen natürlich die Nachteile, die einhergingen, indem man in den kleinen Zimmern gewohnt hat und sich auf den Füßen getreten sind, die Kommunikation nicht gestimmt hat, und solche Beweggründe vielleicht ein bisschen erklärt, die dazu geführt haben.
Wie ich schon gesagt habe, das Büro wurde im Prinzip eigentlich war immer noch in einem Wohnhaus mit vielen kleinen Räumen aufgeteilt, in jedem Zimmer saß einer. Und das funktionierte eigentlich nicht gut, weil die Kommunikation miteinander lief eigentlich nicht so ab, wie ich mir das vorgestellt habe. Ich wollte eigentlich immer einen großen Bürobereich, wo man ständig miteinander kommunizieren kann, sodass wir eigentlich zwangsläufig einen Neubau erstellen wollten. Das Ganze war dann halt auch so, dass wir unsere Leistungsfähigkeit auch gerne mit diesem Gebäude darstellen wollten. Haben dann eben halt versucht, auch was ein interessantes Gebäude dann zu erstellen.
So Konrad explains that the way the original office home office was structured was that it was a bunch of tiny little rooms where mostly one person was working in one room, and that sort of consequently led to isolation. So the communication was kind of lacking in that structure. So sort of from an internal motivation, there was a desire to work in a more communicative, more open environment. And simultaneously he was interested to represent himself in a more innovative, more open way. Also diese Art der Unternehmensdemonstration, Präsentation. Dann erzähl ein bisschen, woher wir uns kennen und warum wir die Architekten da eines Vertrauen wurden.
Despang Architekten haben wir kennengelernt bei mehreren Bauvorhaben, die wir in den 1990er Jahren gewickelt haben. Das Interessante an Despang Architekten fand ich immer, die sind irgendwie anders rangegangen an Bauvorhaben wie andere Architekten. Die haben immer versucht, Architektur näher zu bringen. Ja, müssen wir irgendwie was rausschneiden?
Kriegen wir hin. Ja. Manchmal ist es auch ganz Authentisches drin zu lassen. Nee, du hast es mir ja schon vorher erklärt. Ich kann es natürlich gleich übersetzen im Vorgespräch. So the question was, how did he favor Despang Architects, me being the principal, to design his new home? And he said he was in touch with Despang Architekten us through a couple of projects in the 90s, and we probably have to, in all honesty and fairness, to say that your father and my father had already worked together way back in the days, and then sort of in both firms sort of rejoined, and we sort of were interested in rejuvenating the firm's profiles. So he obviously works with a number of architects, because Konrad Krogmann is, at that time, has been a very well established firm that architects like to work with. So he was in touch with lots of architects and had all the choice. And he nicely and politely says that we were his choice because he thought we think about approaching the project in a different way and sort of raising the bar or pushing it above the average, above the limit, to really looking for the soul of the building, also die Seele des Bauens, so to speak. Being concerned about everything what a client wants, but actually doing more. Also dieses Verständnis, dass eben Baukultur mehr ist sozusagen als die reine Befriedigung des Bauherrn, dass der Bauherr eine Verantwortung hat sozusagen über das eigene Wirken hinaus, habe ich versucht so ein bisschen zu erklären dabei. So in this case here, the special circumstance was that I had already been starting my full-time teaching career in the US. Also ich habe ja zu der Zeit schon Vollzeit in Amerika gelebt. Auch das hat sich nicht abgestreckt, das mit uns zu probieren. Gab natürlich die Infrastruktur des Büros noch in Deutschland, aber im Grunde genommen, glaube ich, rückwirkend betrachtet war das ja auch so ein gewisses, was dich fasziniert hat, zu sagen, da sind mal welche, die ein bisschen über den Tellerrand hinaus gucken, also einen größeren und weiteren Horizont haben. Und ich glaube, das Thema energetisches Bauen hat dich ja, glaube ich, auch von Anfang an so in diesem Stadium interessiert. Vielleicht kannst du dazu ein bisschen was sagen, dass du sozusagen auch, also wie du dich darstellen wolltest als Unternehmen.
Nicht darstellen wollte, wie man das?
Also, dass man sich als modernes Unternehmen eben auch sozusagen umwelttechnisch, ökologisch, nachhaltig präsentiert, auch baulich.
Ja, alleine durch unsere Bauherren, mit denen wir ständig zu tun haben. Die Bauten, für die wir erstellen, werden heutzutage immer moderner, immer energetisch moderner, sodass wir eigentlich auch mit dem neuen Bürogebäude zeigen wollten, was eigentlich heutzutage auch technisch möglich ist, sodass wir natürlich auch mit diesem Bürogebäude einen Energiestandard erreichen wollten, der eigentlich auf dem neuesten Stand ist. Also wir sind das ja aber dann so angegangen, dass wir nicht vorher irgendwie großartig Berechnungen gemacht haben, was wir im Prinzip alles machen müssten. Wir haben eher gesagt, wir wissen etwa diesen Wandaufbau, was wir machen wollen, und gucken hinterher, was für einen Energieverbrauch wir haben, um dann eben auch wirklich zu sagen, den und den Energiestand haben wir auch erreicht.
So Konrad explains that sort of when he took over the firm from his dad, he was interested in sort of updating, renovating, innovating the firm's profile. And one of the points was that he said that he, as a contractor in the 21st century, is pretty much obligated to society in building zero net energy buildings. And he had done that with several architects at that time, so for him it was almost a no-brainer to do that as well for himself in his building. However, society has made it tremendously complicated to build energy efficiently. You need to use special softwares, you need to have specially trained people. If you want to get external funding, you need to do a lot of paperwork, and he was not interested in any of that. He was interested in making a building that actually does the job to be off the grid. So this is why we teamed up, that he says, I've been building these buildings for quite a while, and we said we've been designing them, so we both can do it. And it was sort of an innovation in itself, because up to that point the Passivhaus standard, which this building has been built to, had been pretty much a technocratic system where you had to do a lot of these things. And we said basically here you don't need all that. You can actually do it by knowing what you're doing. So it's kind of the intuitive way of building, which is the way your grandpa and your father basically had sort of passed on tradition from one generation to the next through working together. So we said we should be able to do that actually in the 21st century, which some of us, me included, call the post-fossil area, that if we keep these things simple, we will reach a much broader mass, and if we make it too complicated, which is Passivhaus system kind of tended to gravitate towards at that time. Also diese Innovation sozusagen, hier diese analoge Art des Passivhausbauens. And Konrad was also not sort of forced to do it to any kind of standard. He did it on his own, but it was very important to him. So, an dieser Stelle vielleicht so ein bisschen, machen wir vielleicht erstmal eine Pause, passt hier auch gerade gut mit dem Auto. We take a short break and we'll be back in a second. Okay, we had our little technical break, eine kleine technische Pause. Ja, wir sitzen jetzt also sozusagen vor dem Ergebnis des Resultates einer Entscheidung. Und vielleicht erklärst du einfach ein bisschen, warum das Gebäude von dieser Seite so aussieht, wie es aussieht.
Also wir wollten auf jeden Fall das Gebäude möglichst hell haben von innen. Es sollte möglichst offen gestaltet sein. Vor allen Dingen auch, wir wollten uns nicht irgendwie verstecken. Also jedermann sollte sehen, in diesem Bürogebäude wird auch gearbeitet. Außenstehende, die hier vorbeigehen, zum Ortskern hin, man sollte halt sehen, in diesem Bürogebäude wird gearbeitet. Also von daher war für uns stand eigentlich von Anfang an fest, dass wir uns möglichst groß öffnen. Auch das ist ja jetzt die Südseite. Wir wollten natürlich auch möglichst viel Licht einfangen. Mit dem großen Dachüberstand haben wir halt die Sonneneinstrahlung in den Griff bekommen, sodass wir in so eine starke Überhitzung bekommen. Diese Öffnung ist eigentlich auch geglückt, weil die Leute akzeptieren mittlerweile das Gebäude so, wie es jetzt hier ist. Das ist eigentlich, für unsere Firma hat das eigentlich ein großer Wertschöpfung.
So Konrad explains what we see in the back is almost, he in the break he said he sometimes has a hard time to describe because he thinks it's so obvious. So the obvious, the form is determined by two performative factors. One of them is solar. So south is this way. So the building is basically facing south. We have to say we're sitting here. I brought almost Hawaii temperature. So the way it is here today, it's like that every day in paradise, where I'm privileged to live for most of the time of the year. Here the winters are rather cold, the summers can be much hotter. In fact, the last couple of days were a lot hotter. So here the architecture has to be wall architecture. This is why you see a lot of glazing here. So the building faces south so that the low sun in the winter can deeply penetrate into the space and can sort of passively heat the building. So the building actually has no furnace, and for Hawaii people, more interesting, has no air conditioning. The building works just very naturally with the elements. So the roof overhang is actually determined by, as you explained, by the high-standing sun in the summer, which then shades the glass facade so the building doesn't overheat. So the other factor is also an S factor. It's the social factor, because he says this is where the town center is, this is where the people are, and he wanted to literally demonstrate to the public how they work. So he said, as opposed to the past where there was this kind of ambiguous building which one didn't know what was going on the inside, here he wanted to present and to showcase what they are doing. So the people are very welcome to see how they're working, what they're working. There's nothing to hide. So it's a literal representation, articulation of the firm's philosophy that wanted to say we're modern, we're innovative, we care about the local, which is we care about the world. This is why this building here makes its contribution to the world climate by being off the grid. But it's also a very local building that basically says I'm here, I want to support this community, I'm paying taxes, so I'm an integral part of the community, and I'm proud of that. And the people who were kind of skeptical at the beginning because it was something new, people were coming here and thought it was a UFO that landed, a flying saucer. I know that you guys did a tremendous work in street work, literally, because whenever someone came and was kind of looking, you invited them in, served them a coffee, explained to them, and they left the building with an awareness and an understanding and actually an appreciation of the building. So it's very important that modern architecture, that sort of from some people's point of view doesn't fit in after a critical and intellectual discourse, people actually understand. And now the whole community is very proud of you guys and embracing the building and seeing a very valuable contribution to the community. And as you say, you think the building was a very, very legitimate, very strategic, and very useful investment into your company. So I think from here on we're going to move around the building. So we take a little break and we show you guys the building from the other side, and then last but not at all least, because it's an office building, we go inside. So we'll be right back. Okay, so we have moved around here, and I'm not in the picture here. We always try something new because we're both entrepreneurs as far as production. So trying our best and try to spice things up. So we move to the north facade, and I'm going to ask Konrad why the building looks from this side the way it looks. Also hier die Frage, warum sieht das Gebäude hier so fundamental anders aus?
Also zum einen sieht man ja hier sehr deutlich diesen Geländeversprung, der hier gegeben ist. Also von der Nordseite aus gehen wir in das Gebäude rein, ebenerdig. Von der anderen Seite haben wir vorhin gesehen, von der Südseite, dass sich dadurch dann eben dieses Gebäude aus dem Gelände her raushebt. Die Nordseite ist wie gesagt ganz anders, sieht ganz anders aus, ist also sehr klein gehalten, weil wir hier natürlich auch vom energetischen her sonst die größten Energieverluste hätten. Was eben vom Äußeren des Gebäudes her wollten wir natürlich auch immer möglichst viel von unserer Leistungsfähigkeit, von unserem Leistungsspektrum darstellen. Jetzt sind das hier diese Außenfassaden in Faserzement, die sowohl auf den Seitenflächen wie auch oben auf dem Dach, wie auch auf der Untersicht verbaut worden sind.
Yeah, so Konrad explains that as you can sort of gently see, there's a slope in the terrain here, so in the topography, and we use that to actually access the building basically egress-wise straight from this parking lot here without going through any steps, and then the building is cantilevering out and is hovering over the ground to the south side. And the building, if you imagine the building in plan and in section, the building is a trapezoid. So that causes or leads to that the building basically is maximum big to the south and maximum small to the north, which this is the north side. So this is where, imagine, which we will never have in Hawaii, lucky us, we never have these cold, brutal winds, but the mainland, for example, has plenty of that. I've lived in Nebraska for many years, and so I know that very well. And in fact, actually, when we had the chance to work together, I actually was still in Nebraska. That was in 2008, which is 2008, 2009. So at that time, I was in Nebraska, so I can also say it's been informed by by that experience as well, to keep the building very, very small, so you have the smallest possible surface that could be hit by these cold winds. And the cold winds basically scoop over the building's roof. The roof here, it's a little hard to see, but if you imagine what you see on the very right side here, this is a fiber cement cladding. For Konrad, it was important to actually use the building in showcasing the business and the philosophy of his firm, and he actually has a not insignificant portion of his work is contracting work with his fiber cement board. So he basically used that and he demonstrated that. What is very innovative is that he also used it on the roof. So we call that the fifth facade. So this building not only is covered with it on the sides, but also on the roof. This is kind of unique. So this is kind of the philosophy of the building. Also these wood panels that you can see here, this is one of his employees getting off work. If we're lucky, we can see him scooping off on his mofa there, going home. And so these facade panels also were some that basically Konrad still had, and he said, why not use them? And I think you had to order. We can see actually the two little pieces there, kind of you had to buy to add on. So it's this idea of basically being resourceful and repurposing, sort of upcycling something that otherwise would have stayed in your shop forever, or you would have ended up in the landfill. So this is interesting. So I think it's time to give our audience an idea of what the benefit is of all of that on the inside, where you spend most of your time. So take another little break. Okay, we'll try to position ourselves halfway decently. So now we have sort of an unplugged scene here that we're hoping is here and works. Thank you very much for demonstrating that one can work in here. So maybe Konrad, explain to us again what you were expecting from the work environment, also nochmal so deine Vorstellung von der Arbeitsweise oder auch erklären. Jetzt kann man es ja sehen, hier, wie es im Grunde funktioniert. Vielleicht auch bei der Gelegenheit gleich was zur Akustik sagen.
Ja, also Wunsch war immer, dass wir ein Bürogebäude haben, nicht mit einzelnen kleinen Räumen, sondern ein großes Büro, wo ständig auch Blickkontakt unter den Mitarbeitern ist, wo jeder jeden eigentlich direkt ansprechen kann, so dass nicht jeder irgendwie in seinem einzelnen Kämmerchen sitzt und still vor sich hin arbeitet, sondern dass es im Prinzip auch eine Gemeinschaft ist. Und dieses große Büro ist natürlich dann immer dann zu beachten, dass die Akustik dann auch stimmt. Dafür haben wir hier unter dem Dach akustisch wirksame Paneele, die also von der Akustik her sehr gut wirken.
Wie man merkt, jetzt sprechen wir hier drin. So Konrad explains that his idea was, as we started to talk about outside, he wanted this wide open space, so to speak. And that came from, the keyword could be community, that he thinks of his company and his firm of being people who are all equal and they all work together. So there's no separation, there's no segregation. You see the sort of table landscape here where everyone can see everyone's work, and that was the idea. So sort of something to take into consideration when you materialize that idea is acoustics. Because again, the intention was to increase and optimize the quality at work, the work quality, the work environment. So if you have a wide open space, usually you have the problem of echoing. So the acoustics is a big. So we were talking about that actually certain principles already sort of implied in the basic design. So we're talking about that this plan is a trapezoid as well as the section. So the plan for the people who are not architects is the footprint of the building. So these walls are actually not parallel. They get wider and wider the more you get to the south for the previously explained reasons. So already in the plan, you have a mechanism that sort of supports good acoustics, because sound travels usually parallel and bounces off. So here the sound waves sort of get diffused by the geometry of the footprint. And then in the building detail, as he was pointing out to the ceiling, for the ceiling he used an innovative acoustic wood paneling, where the wood is sliced and there's absorbing material behind, and that basically, in addition to the footprint, is basically helping with the perfect acoustics. We just have a visitor. Come on in here. It's good to have live and alive people here, so we're broadcasting here for Hawaii. So thanks for coming in at this moment. We're just talking about the acoustics. We're talking here, so actually this is a sort of a live proof test for how good the acoustics are. Ja, wir machen eine kleine Aufnahme und senden das nächste Woche in Hawaii. Cool. You got an English-speaking shirt, that's great.
Ja, aber ich kann überhaupt kein Englisch. Nur kurz Frage wegen morgen. 8 Uhr abfahren, ne?
Ja.
8 Uhr.
8 Uhr.
Gut.
Viertel vor 8 hier bist.
Gut, dann eben Bulli packen.
Ja, die Leiter auf dem Bulli.
Ja, so kann ich machen. Alles klar.
Okay.
So, bis dann. Ciao.
Tschüss. Also das war die Live-Abstimmung des morgigen Arbeitsantrittes.
Ja.
This was the live coordination of when to start working tomorrow. So again, this is not fake, this is as real as it can be. So maybe talking about the materiality, vielleicht sollten wir über die Materialien ansonsten noch ein bisschen reden und einfach diese Naturbelassenheit der Materialien.
Ja, wichtig war für uns natürlich auch wieder auch im Inneren zu zeigen, mit welchen Materialien wir arbeiten. Jetzt im Bereich der Wände und im Dach ist es natürlich Holz. Im Bereich hier dieser eingestellten Kuben sind das wieder unsere Fassadenmaterialien. Dann haben wir gesagt, alles, was nicht zu unserem Materialbereich gehört, wie Beton zum Beispiel, wollten wir aber nicht verstecken, sondern dann eben auch in seiner natürlichen Form sichtbar lassen, so wie jetzt hier diese Treppe, die dann auch einfach unbehandelt, einfach als Stahlbetontreppe angebaut ist. Wie den Fußboden, da sind keine Fliesen drauf, sondern einfach als rohes Material dann auch sichtbar ist.
So one aspect of the building that's sort of significant and relevant is materiality. He said, of course, the sort of the cladding, the enclosure, kind of the cocooning almost of the space is, of course, his material of wood. So it's this all-encompassing, all kind of embracing, containing material, whereas everything that's supplemental to that, as for example the staircase and the walls are out of concrete, and as the wood is basically left untreated, so is the stairs as well as the floor. The floor is poured concrete, and it's just been left plain and simple. And sort of besides being sort of the philosophy of the firm, it also has the practical reason that it sort of ages more in grace, also diese Alterungsfähigkeit der Baustoffe. And at the same time, also, if you leave materials that have thermal mass, as the staircase and the floor, you can activate that to moderate the temperature in your building. Also die Speicherfähigkeit natürlich auch noch ein ausschließendes Kriterium. And if you see the guardrails here, one of my favorite pictures is that actually this way outside, a couple of, well, not even many miles away, is a monastery, is a cloister. So there were some, when you had an open house here a while ago, there were some nuns here. And one of my favorite pictures is a nun walking up the stairs. And because the stair is actually not quite to code, we have to admit, code requires a handrail. And I remember that your idea was to leave everything as pure as you can. Actually, in fact, there was no guardrail, there was no glass. But I will never forget your father and we discussing with him if it should have. It was a very interesting discussion. And at the time, the nun came and actually had no problem of processing up the stairs I basically said we don't need code. It's basically approved from higher up, the highest instance. Und das dann eine schöne Situation. Okay, I think we're going to take another little mini break, and we're going to walk up and going to conclude the show on the Belvedere. Alright, so we walked up the stairs just like the nun did. And now we're upstairs. Ja, wenn du ein bisschen erklärst, worum es sich hier oben handelt und was hier die Besonderheiten bei der Planung waren.
Ja, jetzt befinden wir uns hier in den oberen Bereichen, was einmal mein Büro hier oben ist. Im hinteren Bereich kann man vielleicht noch den Besprechungsraum erkennen. Aber auch diese Räume sind alle sehr offen gehalten, einfach nur durch einfache Glasscheiben abgetrennt, um eben halt auch diesen Charakter dieses großen, nicht unterbrochenen Raumes zu erhalten. Selbst die Glasscheiben hier, die halt die Trennung noch darstellen, sind mit offenen Fugen versehen, sodass man eigentlich nicht von Raum mehr sprechen kann, sondern vom Einzelraum sprechen kann, sondern dass es eben immer noch der große Raum ist. Vielleicht kann man auch unten noch erkennen die eingestellten Boxen, die zum einen im hinteren Bereich der Kopierraum beherbergen. Hier vorne sind die WC-Bereiche und angegliedert hier vorne die Küche. Ja, das ist hier oben eigentlich.
Yeah. So Konrad explains what I had introduced as the Belvedere is in fact where he worked, but again, not as being sort of higher than the normal people, just making efficient use of the space, as according to the section you have a higher volume here and you have a higher space, so this is why there's the gallery in here. And he says the glass front, which we are not even sure how much you even see it in the picture, because that was the intent, to make it almost invisible. So it's floor-to-ceiling glass, you don't see any mullion, the glass joint is in fact left open. So there is a certain sort of discretion, acoustical discretion, but you can still hear when someone is talking. So again, everything is sort of encouraging and enforcing. So there is no idea that I'm the boss and I'm here and you guys are down there. It's basically pretty much everyone is visible and approachable all the time. The space over there where we're actually going to move next and conclude the show is a little conference room. Konrad points out what you can see in the back is what he calls the box. And the box goes back to Louis Kahn's idea of the served and the servant spaces. So everything that is kind of supporting the office life, as the restrooms, as the copy machine, as the technology, is basically comprised and incorporated into the box, as then the box is kind of spaced between the outer wall, and this is the little kitchen area where you can make yourself a tea and a coffee and can have little breaks. So that's another aspect of again the kind of social community idea of the building, which is the basic idea that people can in fact see what you're doing. Nothing is hidden. Everything is transparent, literally and figuratively, as far as your philosophy of your firm. So with that, I guess we're going to move on to the conference room. Okay, we've finally arrived in the conference room here. Again, you just brought up that some people ask you about how it is to work in here, and they're sort of skeptic about being seen more than you seeing things. So what's your opinion about that?
Also was auffällt ist, wenn wir gerade hier im Besprechungsraum sind, wenn wir Gäste hier haben, die sind zuerst immer total beeindruckt von dieser Aussicht, so dass man eigentlich immer erstmal 10 Minuten braucht, bevor man überhaupt irgendwie ein Gespräch führen kann. Also die gucken erst einmal alle nur nach draußen und sagen, boah, tolle Aussicht, aber sich vorstellen, in so einem offenen Gebäude zu arbeiten, ist für die meisten sehr schwierig. Aber wenn sie es dann sehen, finden sie es eigentlich alle ganz toll und sagen, so möchte ich auch gerne arbeiten. Also ich liebe das eigentlich auch, dass man eben hier sitzt und auch alles, was draußen passiert, sogar mitkriegt. Also jedes Auto, was vorbeifährt, sehe ich, auch wenn ich es vielleicht gar nicht unbedingt sehen will, aber man bekommt einfach sehr viel von außen auch mit. Und auch eben, wie gesagt, alles, was außen ist, bekommt auch mit, was hier im Gebäude passiert. Und, das ist eigentlich sehr schön.
Well, Konrad reports about when he has guests, like business partners and people there. First of all, they're very sort of taken by the space, I should say. So there's no way they can get to the point of business right away. It always takes them 10 minutes, you say, approximately, to adjust to the situation of being flooded with daylight, of being flooded with being in nature, basically. It's like there is no sort of threshold because the glass is invisible and it's transparent. So then after adjusting, basically people start to appreciate that and kind of feel how it's actually supporting creative working and creative thinking. And I think that's another aspect. I was talking to my friend Mark back in Hawaii, who's German originally. He's from Frankfurt, and he has a fitness business. And he started basically to talk to corporations, to firms about doing workout with the people. So I think we talked about potentially teaming up and saying, if you design buildings this way and then have a little fitness program for the employees, it basically is very nice of you to do that, but there's also the benefit for you that, as you told me before, that your employees, your team, your staff is way more productive. So you can actually measure, I think you even told me that they get less sick, they're more motivated, so actually it pays off. There's a benefit. That's not a benefit that you do only because it's something that you do it because you feel that's the way to go and that's the way you want to work yourself. So what works for you works for your people as well. I think that's an important kind of message that the building basically has, that a supportive work environment together with the great, we just had your wife and business partner Heike stop by. She didn't want to be on camera, so that she says hi, so that you can walk over, you can have lunch and dinner, you can come back. So life and work, they're not separated things. You don't get into your car at the end of the day and have to drive. In Oahu, we have the phenomenon, there's a lot of development going west, and we only have one interstate, which is H1, and you get stuck in traffic there. So you waste an enormous amount of quality of time, of life on the road, which you basically don't have because live and work is sort of an entity that is not separated. So that's an important aspect, and we saw, to the employees, and again, the show is unplugged, so they were happy and motivated, and that's a good thing. And so the other thing, we want to show two boards. Maybe we do this here right away. Up in here. I'm going to get another one. You got to move over a little bit more. Yeah. Willst du kurz erklären, was die sind?
Ja, das ist der Wettbewerb, an dem wir teilgenommen haben, am Niedersächsischen Staatspreis für Architektur. Und bei diesem Staatspreis sind wir dann heute mit dem zweiten Platz ausgezeichnet worden.
So Konrad explains this is was the competition for the Lower Saxony States Award of Architecture. So this is the highest recognition for architecture on the state level. And the humble person he is, he always says he came in second, where I'm always saying he came in first, because the first prize was an award for the category of sacral spaces, so a very nice converted synagogue was awarded, and so his his project became first winner in the category of office buildings here. So again, this is a state awarded building basically, which was a great sort of encouragement and acknowledgement for you guys as the client. Basically what you see in here is everything that we showed you as well. I want to point out this picture here, which is the night shot, also dieses Nachtbild. The building got a nickname here, which actually the press, the publications also used. They call it the Wood TV, also den Holzfernseher, because you can imagine here we also have something that is different than Hawaii. The winters are, the days are short, so it gets dark pretty early, like 4 p.m.-ish. It basically gets dark. And this is a motivated firm, as we started talking about, so they work longer than 4 o'clock. Also, it takes a while until it gets bright. So some significant hours of the day, you actually have the lights on in the building because it's dark outside. And then the building basically starts to glow and becomes that beacon that just fascinates people in the neighborhood and in the environment. And once again, it impresses them that they can actually see what you guys are doing. I want to point out this information on the board here. There's some very fine writing here, which is actually the energy use of the building that we both. And when I say we both, I also want to, maybe we can take the boards down. I think everyone has seen enough. When I say we. From the very beginning, Konrad again had asked us to come up with the initial building concept that actually was sort of a napkin sketch that I did in one of my flights coming back from Lincoln, and he was immediately sold on the idea. And when we were talking how to further work with that, we obviously, as we always work, were interested in doing the entire architectural job, from the concept idea down to the working drawing, down to the construction management. Whereas here it was clear that sort of the client would also be the contractor. So most of the work was actually done by yourself. You subcontracted some work. We should also mention that actually this here, what we can see, what actually allows this wide open space is a steel structure that's embedded in the cladding. And so the steel structure you basically subcontracted as well as the concrete work, but everything else that you can do yourself, especially the woodwork and the facade, you basically did yourself. But I was the one who was sort of, implicitly expecting to be commissioned with the working drawings with an Ausführungsplan. And Konrad said, I think I can do that myself. And I responded, I heard that before more than once, because most clients like to say that it saves them money. And Konrad said, I think I learned from you when we did especially the solid wood school for disabled children. You basically I said, I think I learned from you how you think, because I was the one who made it, what you thought. So let me give it a try. And I said, okay, good luck, so to speak. And you came back, and it was very nicely old school on tracing paper. And you blew me away because you had all the details figured out and worked out. So then I said, okay, in this case, I can let you do it. And ever since, it was a phenomenal experience for me. I have to say, it's sort of reconnecting to the old profession of the master builder, der Baumeister, which wasn't the architect yet, because the difference is that these days sort of there was no disconnection between the thinking and the making of architecture. It was all in personal union. It's like the people building the big domes, the guy who had figured that out, he slept in the same tent with the masons, and so there was this entity of thinking and making, which through I think modernism basically got disconnected. And so it led to that architects only have these crazy ideas, and then they pass them on to other people, and they have to do it. And then there's this friction and fraction and potential problems in there. Which here, again, I was amazed. So ever since we you had a phenomenal body of publications and awards for the building, and I was very particular saying it's our design. So I always credit you as being part of the design team. I always say you have been the architect as much as I have been the architect, and I have to say thank you for that. That's one of the most phenomenal experiences, and this is why I was less brown-nosing when I started off saying you're my favorite client. It's because of that whenever we had something to solve, we figured it out, we worked it out, we discussed it. You know, sometimes we had to fight over it, but we always came to agreement. You know, in some cases it has to be a compromise, but this is what life is about. And the building is not at all a compromise, and in fact, again, when we applied for this award, we didn't want the building to be recognized by its energy efficiency, because we both think that it's a problem of our time that we mean well in making buildings energy efficient, but actually aesthetically it's not an improvement. Most of the energy efficient buildings, the passive houses, can be pretty ugly houses. In fact, there are, in some cases, too many cases, very ugly buildings. They're just styrofoam glued boxes with little windows, and you throw photovoltaic on the roof. And by the way, this building is passive. You have some active components, we should add. They're actually on the roof of your production facility. So you actually totally net zero, because you bring down consumption in your building. Everyone can see the daylight efficiency in here. You have the sun that's heating up the space, and the little you need for hot water, for basically electricity to run the lights in the winter, run your computers, is basically been done by the photovoltaics on the roof. So it's a combination of active systems and basically passive systems. So again, the Lower Saxony States Award was a great recognition, because your building got recognized the way you wanted it to be recognized, as an innovative space for your team, for your firm. That sort of, as a side effect, it always reminds me of my mentor, Professor Patrick Grant from North Carolina State University, who always says sustainability should be like gravity. Also Nachhaltigkeit sollte sein wie die Erdanziehungskraft. You have to deal with it no matter what. So the structure you have to deal with, you have to build in a way that the whole holds up. And so sustainability should be something that actually you do as a means. But in very few cases you would say this building is about structures. There are few buildings in the world where structure is a phenomenal part. Actually, the one that you always told me that the building that finally convinced you to work with us was the school in Ilsede, which is a concrete school that you had done the woodwork. That's on the interior. In fact, that kind of panel system here you apply there, but it's basically a concrete building. So that always surprised me, that sort of a concrete building that I had designed convinced you to design a wood building. But it was the case that that building is pretty much, one could say it's a lot about structure, but most buildings have to deal with structure, and they do. But you would never say the concept of the building is structure. So for us it was important not to say this building is about sustainability. Sustainable principles, it's what it's based upon. But it's basically about beautiful, healthy, happy space. So with that, thank you very much for hosting us today. The walk around your building, and for me always a pleasure to be here again, be able to come back and see the building holding up that well, and always and ever again fulfilling the promises that you and the expectations you had in the building is a true pleasure.
Ja, auch ich kann mich nochmal bedanken bei dir für den tollen Entwurf. Also wir sind jetzt schon 5 Jahre in dem Gebäude drin, und das Gebäude hat eigentlich alle Erwartungen übertroffen. Also man könnte schon sagen, es ist besser geworden, wie wir eigentlich erwartet haben.
So Konrad returns the compliment and thanks us as the